landlord since 1992 and building my portfolio seriously in the capital from 2004. It's always a pleasure to talk about the property market in London, and who better to join me than a director of a estate and lettings agency and also a London landlord himself, Marc Grundherr of Benham and Reeves. And Marc, there's just so much going on in the London property market. You've got a couple of topics that you want to talk about, and I've got a couple of topics as well. So we'll start with yours, Marc. You wanted to have a few comments about the removal of Section 21. Are London landlords worried about that?
Hello, everyone, and thanks for having me, Vanessa. But yes, so Section 21, the government have decided that tenants are very hard done by and landlords are multi-billionaires and landlords can afford to take the hit on the chin, and we treat tenants terribly and we kick them out in order to get another £1 a week rent. And that's the endemic view of shelter and all of these bodies that advise the government. The reality is most landlords are decent, and I think this legislation is nuts. It's going to mean that you rent a property to somebody and they can stay as long as they like, unless you either are going to move back into the property yourself and you give them notice, or you want to sell the property and again give them notice. You can't put the rent up by anything extraordinary, and I don't know any landlords that go bonkers and ask to double the rent. And there'll be a tribunal or some kind of property body who'll help guide rents. But you know, I think it's so unnecessary to treat everybody like their children and have this ridiculous, you know, ability that a tenant can stay forever. I understand with the price of property and people's lives that they want to have longer term tenancies, and I get that. And landlords, I don't know any landlords, but then maybe because we're in London and we're reputable and we deal with, you know, decent landlords, we don't put the rent up, as I said, double, and we don't just kick tenants out who've been good tenants. If a tenant's a good tenant, you want to keep them for ages. The tenants you don't want are the ones who are very difficult or do cause lots of noise or do cause lots of trouble, and the legislation is going to allow you to get them out. But you can imagine how difficult it's going to be. You can imagine that I can just foresee a difficult scenario in a certain segment of the market. I don't think landlords should panic, and I think if you're in the London market or a major city, then you know, most of the people renting anyway are here for 2-3 years, and then they go 4 years, 5 years. We as a business, we have a couple of tenants who've been there for over 10 years, but we're not really in the, you know, the kind of sheltered housing or the long-term tenancy market. That's not us. That's in the country. And I just think, you know, they could just leave us to get on with it and manage it in the normal way. I don't think landlords are as bad as they're portrayed. So I don't think it's anything for landlords to worry about. But if you've got a property where you've had a tenant for 5, 6, 10 years, and you're going to be worried that you can't kick them out, then you should rethink whether that investment is what you want. I mean, will it mean that landlords will start only choosing tenants who are working in the area short term? Will it mean landlords don't want tenants who've got pets? You know, will it mean, you know, these are things that people, you know, civil servants, when they're drafting it, they don't think about this. I mean, I just mentioned pets, and actually that's the second thing I would like to talk about, which I didn't say to you, Vanessa, is I think pets is one of the biggest overlooked areas in our market. You know, how many people have, I've got a dog. Many of our friends have got dogs and cats. Now, the way they changed the law that I can still only charge 5 weeks rent as a deposit, even whether I've got a pet or no pet, that's outrageous. So we have loads of clients who say, no, I want a larger deposit. We can't take it. Well, I don't want to pet them. And we have tenants who come to us and say, I've got a dog, take another month's rent as a deposit because I know my dogs will get, and we can't. And it just means that we have an awful lot of landlords who say, don't show my property if they've got a pet. I don't want them. And that's ridiculous. If you rent a property to someone with a dog and they're good tenants, they're going to look after it and stay there. Again, it's ill thought out. And I don't see how it's going to be changed now. But hey, that's my other slight bugbear at the moment.
Well, it's not only that, Mark, it's that London rental scene is I would say the vast majority of what's available in the stock of London rental properties is apartments and flats, and very often they have something in the lease to stop a pet being allowed to be kept within the block, and then we can have issues of dogs that are left in an apartment all day who are barking all the time and causing disruption. So I totally agree with you that this blanket kind of default position to allow pets is very ill thought out, and I don't know how it can be enforced when lease terms and conditions are actually against pets being kept in certain
I think the view on that's going to be that I think they will try to overwrite what's in the lease if they can, and say unless there's a specific reason you can't have a pet in a flat, then you should have a good reason for it. But I don't know. The devil will be in the detail as always, but let's see.
Yes, and it's sadly lacking at the moment, and with all this political turmoil that's going on with the leadership race, it's kind of been pushed to the back burner, and 100%. Landlords are just left in complete limbo. But it is interesting what you said, because I had a call from the Financial Times earlier this week, and the journalist said, so we're writing an article about landlords putting up rents all the time and how unfair it is. And I said, well, landlords don't put up rents all the time. It is based on supply and demand in the marketplace. Landlords can't just come up with any old number for rent and think that that's going to wash with tenants, because 100%. Tenants are aware of what the market rent is for that type of property in that postcode. So it's a fallacy to say landlords are constantly raising the rents. Yes. All landlords are doing are just meeting the market rent, because 100%. That means that the property gets let quickly. A lot of landlords don't put up rents at all, and I know I only tend to put them up in between tenancies when I've got an opportunity to raise the rent without disrupting a tenant that's been there for a long time, has been a very good tenant. So there's so many myths and so much rhetoric around at the moment that it's quite infuriating that landlords don't really have a voice in all of this. But you mentioned that you deal with both sales and lettings. The lettings market is still as scorching hot as the weather we've been having lately, isn't it?
100%. I've never, it's interesting what you said about rents. The rental market is the hottest I've ever seen. I'll give you one example. We had an ex-council flat that was the property of the daughter of a client of ours, and we already let. She called us. It was in Hammersmith, down the road from my office. She called us. Generally speaking, it's not really our market, but we took it on because the client's existing. And we went to see, and she said, how much is it worth? And we said, it's a one-bedroom flat on the river. It's got to be 1,500–1,600 a month. And she said, gosh, my neighbour only got 1,250. And we were like, seems very low. And she said, well, look, Mark, put it on at 1,600. We put it on 1,600 on the Monday. Sorry, it was last week. On the Thursday night, we put it up with one exterior photo of the block, because we didn't want people to believe it's this beautiful period flat or modern flat. We wanted people to know what the outside of the block was. We put it on when we left at 6, just before 6 on the Thursday. By the time they came in on Friday morning, we had 26 inquiries. We took it off. We did one block viewing at 11 o'clock. 14 people turned up, and it rented at 1,750 because we had someone say, I want it. I'll come back to the office and pay 1,750. She went to ask her neighbour how she'd only got 1,250 because the neighbour had put it on Gumtree and had done it herself. She got 1,250. We got... It's mad. 70, we got £500 a month rent more. I mean, but anyway, that just gives an example. In terms of red hot, there's no stock. There's literally no stock across the market. There's little bits here and little bits there. But as long as it's priced, the only stuff I see that is on the market is stuff where, maybe the example you were giving, if a landlord's just said, oh, it's worth 1,500 a month and just puts it on at 3,000 a month because he's mad, because that's just stupid, and that we don't do. And we put the rents up if that's where the market's going, but we're not silly, and we don't put them up at huge amounts. But yeah, as I said, the market is really busy, and bear in mind that inflation at the moment is running at 11%. So if last year it rented £1,000 a month, this year it should be £1,110 for the same rent, for the landlord. So I think it's so unjust when publications go out there saying landlords are stuffing the rent up and taking advantage. All due respect, so are the petrol companies when they put their price up. So is Tesco's. So are all the other companies. Landlords are only, we on renewal, we increase the rent by the RPI where possible. And as I said, the RPI at the moment is running 11%. So rents are going to climb because of that. And let's also bear in mind, Vanessa, you said about this journalist saying we're pushing landlords up. For the last 10 years, rents have moved very little. That's why yields have get crushed and crushed and crushed. What country in the world would anybody buy on a 3% yield? Nobody would. It's ludicrous, comments like that. It's so annoying. But anyway, the rental market is very, very, very hot, and we can let literally anything moving.
Well, I want to pick up on what you said about the difference between what a self-managing landlord advertising on Gumtree achieved and what you achieved as a regulated agent, and that's £500 difference. That's a very significant difference. And I think it just shows the value of working with an agent such as yourselves that know the market. But not only that, Mark, I believe that landlords that use sites like Gumtree are often targeted by tenants that know they won't get past a letting agent in terms 100%. Of affordability or referencing.
100%.
And this is why I'm such a big advocate of agents, because to my mind you're like a gatekeeper. You're so experienced at referencing tenants. You can spot a questionable tenant from 200 yards, I think. And when we're in these very inflationary environments, going into a possible recession, with energy crisis and things that are going to impact all of us over the coming months, I think it's a time to mitigate your risk and use an agent that has a big footprint in the area and really understands it.
The reality is, an agent will know what rents are happening, what's happening in the local area. If you're in self-letting, whether you're managing and letting yourself as well, if you put your property on Gumtree, what are you gauging the prices by? You're gauging the prices by what they're on Rightmove, what they're on Zoopla. You're trying to get a gauge. You don't really know because you're not in it day to day. And I'm not saying that you can't do well yourself. This is a specific example. We did very much better than they did. But the reality is that you wouldn't just write your will without getting a lawyer, or do your own tax returns without consulting an accountant. Why would you? I know there's a cost element. Of course there is. Agents charge money. We have to earn money. But I think we add more than we take. I genuinely, obviously I'd say that because I'm an agent, but I genuinely feel there's so much legislation. It's not just about the rent. It's about, you touched the nail on the head. I've got to talk about referencing. That's the biggest bugbear. So we use a very small independent referencing agency that two ladies set up 10 years ago because they used to both work for agents and they thought referencing was terrible. So they started this very small agency and we were their second client. They reference our tenants. And can you believe, even though we're an agent, they get one forged passport or non-live passport a month. One forged or online. Last month we had three passports, which to the naked eye looks good. It's only when you run them through the passport checker do you see that. We get forged bank statements. We get fabricated websites. You would be amazed the stuff that goes on in London, especially, and in some of the other big cities. The value, if you're a criminal, if you like. If you can get hold of a property by hook or by crook and you're in there, to get them out is costly, takes time, and they can trash it at the end. So we're really careful in who our tenants are. And I say again and again and again, you know, be careful, check your tenants inside and out. It doesn't, you know, if you lose the odd tenant, I'd rather be cautious than not cautious. So just, I mean, I think it's endemic that everybody wants to save money, but I think the things that agents bring, the referencing is one, dealing with the deposit refund is a really other area, and it's a horribly contentious area because everybody thinks, oh, they've caused a mark on the wall, or they've done this damage or that done damage, but the law is quite tenant focused, and so therefore there's no point saying I want a new table and chairs, because you won't get it. And if you go to arbitration, they'll lose you, and you'll be waiting all this time for the money. So I think you need a professional to help you guide. You know, property is an investment. So even if you give it brand new, you're not going to get it brand new. People have lived there, and that's what you're getting rent for. So I think referencing, dealing with tenancy deposits, you know, collecting the rent when things go wrong, dealing with any maintenance issues and correct contractors. I genuinely feel that agents do bring a lot, but we have landlords that manage themselves and we just do the letting for. I just think it's important, Vanessa. I think it's a two-way street, and you should work. I always say to landlords, if you don't want to pay me all the fees, use me for the bits that you need help with, because most landlords have a day job. You know, they're working, and you've got a 100, 200, 300, 500,000 pound property, and you're going to do it yourself. I mean, it really beggars belief that people, anyway, it's not, I'm an agent, so.
Listen, Mark, I concur 100% what you've said, and always on Property Tribes, we're advocating the use of agents. You know, the typical 10 or 12% commission you pay from the rent. I think you guys work hard for your money, and as a PT partner, you've actually given our community a special offer where they don't pay any management fees. I think it's for the first 3 months.
Exactly.
There's really no excuse not to use an agent and mitigate your risk and have your property fully and properly managed, because it's so important to maintain compliance and asset value, and as you say, it's just, to me, it's a no-brainer. All of my properties across the UK are fully managed. But I want to move on now, Mark, to get your view on the changing rental scene in London. In fact, it was yourself, I think, who has been making a very valid point about the increase in popularity of two-bed flats, because couples are thinking, well, actually, let's have a second bedroom and use it as a home office. And that makes perfect sense to me, particularly as we're seeing a lot in the media about hybrid working from home kind of situation embedding itself now. And there was an article in the paper today saying that the average person goes into the office 2 days a week now. So if I'm a newbie buy-to-let landlord, I'm thinking getting started in the summer of 2022, what would the ideal buy-to-let property look like? What are its features? What would you recommend?
Generally speaking, transport is a key factor. You want to be within 10 minutes walk of a transport hub, and that's whether it's the tube, train. You really, more than that, we survey lots of tenants on a 6 monthly basis. Well, every quarter we tend to do it, but not the same one twice. And we always get 10 minutes or under is the sweet spot for a walk to a tube. So that's number one. Number two, people are increasingly, like you say, some are working from home. There has been a large reversal of that, I might add, where a lot of people are going back into the offices, whether that's 3 or 5 days a week. So having the extra space is really helpful. So I've got to be honest, until COVID hit, I was a one-bed buyer. That's all I bought. In fact, today, all my properties are one beds because I haven't bought anything in the last 8-10 months or year. And now I've got to say I'd buy a 2-bedroom, and I'd buy a 2-bedroom, and funny enough, I put an offer in on something last week. But the reason I buy a 2-bedroom is because Number one, I can rent it still to a single guy who wants to have an extra space. I can rent to a couple, and I can rent to sharers. That's the number one thing. So there is a slightly wider rental market.
Would you add 2 baths to that, Mark? 2 baths. So
2
one
baths. So
suite,
it has to be
family.
two. Has to be 2 baths. If you buy with 1 bath, you're buying a 1 bed with a study. So don't ever buy 1 bath. It has to be 2 bed, 2 bath.
Agreed.
The second thing is you get much better value for money. A 1 bed tends to be X price per square foot. A 2 bed tends to be X minus as much as 10% per square foot. So you get more for your money. So the difference between buying a 1 bed and buying a 2 bed is not so wide. I think you effectively get a little bit higher yield now because there is good, strong demand for 2 bedrooms. But if it were me buying my first investment or adding to a portfolio, I'd buy a 2 bed, 2 bath, no more than 10 minutes to a station, and I'd buy in zone 3 to zone 5 because they're the ones where capital values are lower. Your yield as a percentage will be higher. So that's what I would look at, unless you can find yourself a bargain in a prime area, which is always difficult, and I never find them. So
now, what about things like parking, balcony, energy efficiency of the property? Are these things that are all high up that landlords should be thinking about?
Parking, if you can get it, yes. If you can't get it because they won't give it to you or it's so expensive, then don't buy it. What parking does is help you on the capital value when you sell.
Yeah.
It does not get you any more rent, and you can't rent it separately unless you're in the centre of town. You paid £100,000 for a parking space, then you can rent them. But generally speaking, if it's up to £25,000, I would buy one. If it's £100,000, I wouldn't buy one. It just helps you when you come to sell because people want the idea to have a parking space, but I don't think it affects the rental. In terms of balcony, 100% you need some form of outside space. If you've got 2 people cooped up in a property with no outside space, some of the blocks in central London, if you look at them, somewhere you might drive along the river and you can see them, they have no outside space. They are nightmares now because people want to be able to sit out and be able to go outside. And even if you have communal gardens, I think having outside space is really important. And remember, you don't pay anything for it because in the UK, one of the few countries in the world, they don't charge you for outside space. It's an added extra. So want to try and get it if you can. Coming to energy efficiency. Now this, for years, we as agents said it makes no difference at all, whether you're A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It made no difference on an EPC. Nobody cared about it. It was just a number. It was just a letter, and no one did it. With the cost of living crisis and prices going up, we are now, if we have a property A, B, C, we are now telling tenants, this is on an E, this is on a B. And people are thinking, wow, if the average cost of heating and electric and, in a home now has doubled in the last year, and it's going to go up again. If you're looking at something that's going to cost you £400 a month, as it goes to something that's going to cost you £250 a month, you're going to look at the lower one. And I 100% think that's important now. It's very hard to get an A because you have to get one of these cabins from Norway, which are insulated, so you can be freezing inside or hot inside. But for most normal properties, if you can get up to a C, that is what you need to target with. And I think it will help you on a resale now. If you're with a property on a D or an E or an F, actually, I would be seriously thinking, is this the time to exit? And have a look at your costs. See, is it worth it? Because I totally agree. I think energy efficiency is here now. It's really raised it on the radar for so many people. We've had, for once, we're now having tenants, especially because of the increase in the gas price, saying to us, I hope my boiler is going to be serviced before Christmas, because when it gets this is people at the moment. Our management department said they've had a number of tenants contact us, so please make sure my boiler is serviced before it starts getting cold, because I want to make sure I'm using as minimal gas as possible. this is interesting. People would never have said that
Mm,
before.
mm.
I think
No,
it's a really interesting area.
it is. And I think the other thing is, with regards to EPC ratings in apartments, there's still some grey area about how much the landlord can do to improve the energy efficiency and how much is down to
100%.
the freeholder. So it's something you do need to be aware of. And my view in the current market conditions is to think about future proofing everything that you can and control the
100%.
things that you can control, because there's so much that's outside of our control, what with the energy crisis, the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and all the political upheaval and chaos and all the other things that are happening. So I would be minded to go for C and above on an
100%.
apartment.
If you can get it, 100%. 100%.
You can, yeah. And if you do need to change a boiler, put in an A+ rated boiler, because they are very, very energy efficient. And again, you're future proofing. And there's so many good deals out there now where you can pay monthly for a boiler. So
Yeah.
it makes sense to go for the best you can.
100%.
What about the market for houses in London to rent? I would imagine that on more kind of going out towards the outside zones, you probably would get high demand for maybe a 2 or 3 bedroom house with a parking space out the front for an electric car and a garden.
Electric charging is another one that's interesting. We are asked for that now. Where do I charge my electric car? That's if they have a parking space. Most new developments now have electric car park charging points in their car parks.
Okay.
But again, is it a landlord's responsibility to put in an electric car charging point? No, it's not. Should he do it if he can? Yes, I would if I was a landlord. It costs you £300-400 if you do one of those. I can't remember, not Zip, whatever. You can do those. Zap. You can put them in. But do you have to? No, you don't. But it's an added bow, and it will encourage a tenant to take it. What you don't want to do is let the tenant do it himself, because God knows what he's going to do with your electric. So if they are going to put it in, just be careful. And that's why you have an agent to go around and check that the tenants don't have cables running out through the windows.
Yes, we've seen that, which is very worrying. And could
across the street, I saw one. Across the
fire
street.
hazard.
Across the street. Can you believe that? But in terms of the house market, that's really interesting. So both on the sales and on the lettings market, houses are in such high demand at the moment. Our Hampstead office has never, if we get a house on, it will sell within a matter of days. Forget about weeks, because there is such a tight supply of houses. Hampstead, Highgate. Central London equally. If you have a house, they are expensive, of course they are, because they're generally more square footage, but they rent incredibly well. And so honestly, if you look at it and you look at from a sales price, I don't know if you saw, there was some research recently. We looked at Land Registry, and apartments were down 11% from their peak in August 2022, which is actually quite a, interesting stat. If you think apartments prices have come off from their peak in 2022, and you've actually seen houses go to an all-time high. So you're seeing that. And the reason for that is because everybody's talked about the moving outside London, everyone's talked about having more space. But that's quite interesting. The average flat price is now below £400,000 across the London market. And a house, the average price is now £634,000. Obviously, they're different space, but I'm talking averages. And that's that kind of change, showing what one market's doing and another market's not, shows there are different sectors in the market. And Vanessa, you always interesting think about what you're buying. There are different markets, studios, 1 beds, 2 beds, houses. And I think people they think the whole of property is the same, and it's really not.
Well, it's not. And I always talk about, new build versus Victorian, because there's a huge amount of new build, these shiny glass and chrome flats in London. You see cranes across the skyline, but then you've got Victorian properties. Nobody's making any more Victorian properties. They're very, very popular with people that want to live there. So, you can make both work, but you need to crunch the numbers. But as you say, really down to the landlord doing their due diligence, and
100%.
tapping into the knowledge of a reputable agent such as yourselves with all the local knowledge and footprint. But Mark, as we just close this out now, there is some talk of, signs that the market's beginning to slow, that there have been some price depreciations in London. We're coming into autumn, winter, we're worried about the economy. Do you see the London market remaining robust over the months ahead for both sales and lettings?
Shortage of supply means, and the huge amount of demand, with people getting older, becoming first-time buyers because of prices, and there's no supply out there to do that. So the reality is, yes, we've had ups and downs. I mean, there's some good research recently about how certain boroughs have gone up and certain boroughs have come down. You've seen Kensington and Chelsea take a slight dip over the last month, and you've seen I think it was Havering as the borough, if anybody knows where that is, and that was up 12.5%. You have different prices moving in different areas, but in terms of, I think these are temporary factors. I think in terms of the long-term trajectory, property will always be, it's a home. So whether you're a landlord or a homeowner, people have to live somewhere. So I think we have had, prices have come up, as I said, in apartments over the last couple of years. I think we are in for low but steady capital growth now over the course of the next 2 to 5 years. I think you'll see on average anywhere from 4 to 6%, 5% average, and I don't see a lull in it. The only lull I see coming will be, and forget about the cost of living crisis. It's really important. It's a big impact on people, how much they can afford to pay on their mortgages, and interest rates increasing. Again, it affects people's ability to fund what they want to buy, but they want a home, and there's still an innate desire in people to live, own their own home. So I think they will stretch themselves or reallocate their spend in order to own their own home. So long term, I think it's a good goal. The one thing I do see coming is in March next year, Help to Buy is going to end. And when that ends, first-time buyers will be unable to buy because there will no longer be a 40% loan by the government. They won't be able to get 95% mortgages. Those ones are going to turn to the rental market and will stay in the rental market for longer. That will therefore mean you may see a lull in purchases of those type of first-time buyer smaller homes from new developers. But what's going to happen is those who would have been on the Help to Buy scheme will now turn and become tenants, and so that will strengthen the bottom end of the rental market. So I see you're going to see a dip in transactions, but I think you'll see increased demand from people as the market continues. They don't obviously just jump off. There isn't like, I'm buying now and I'm renting now. The demand will just stay through and they will keep renting for longer. So my prediction is that the market will continue. I don't think there's going to be a crash. I mean, I've never said there was going to be a crash. Prices are up and prices are down, but this is, buying property, as I've always said, and Vanessa, you say it all the time, it's a long-term investment. You don't buy today and think I'm going to sell next year with some massive profit. And if you are doing that and you're successful at it, can you give me a call? Because I don't know how to do that. But if you're doing that and you can't exit with a big profit, that's because that's not what this market's about. With the costs and the stamp duty and all of the things, you should be buying now. I use it as wealth creation. I hate that word because it sounds like I'm trying to put away hundreds of millions of pounds. But to put, even if you invest £100,000 because you borrow 60%, over a 10-year period, that 100 will grow with the rent you'll make and your capital appreciation. You'll grow. And that's what property investors should be looking at. Landlords, whether you're new or old, you should be looking at what you can afford for long-term gain. Don't worry about prices come off in 2, 3, 5 years time. So what? Over the long term, you will make money. And as long as you don't put yourself under pressure, so your every penny counts and matters. And therefore, if things change and interest rates go up and you're under so much pressure and have to exit, that's you shouldn't be doing it. You should do it so you have a nice, there's a nice cushion there to allow you to hold it over a 10-year period. and it's, they're great assets. Property's a great asset. If you have children and a family, they can move into it at some point. If they don't want to, they can rent it and they can get the income. So I think it's such a good, long-term investment strategy. That's my view, and that's what I've done. And lots of our clients have done the same thing.
Well, I know these are conversations that you have day in, day out when, prospective landlords or property investors contact you for advice. And I know you're so open to hearing from them and helping them find the right investment for them. So I do encourage everybody that's got an interest in London property to do get in touch with Marc. He's very generous with sharing his information. And I'll finish, Marc, by saying I'm going to keep the faith with the London property market. I think it's a safe haven in times of trouble. It's got a track record for being that. I'm confident that the demand is going to remain there. It's a very big, powerful, active city with all that we talked before about all the tech clusters coming in and all these different niche industries that are starting up within the capital. So I'm very happy with my stock in London, all rented out, no issues, touch wood. But I think it's really valuable to hear from you, and I just want to compliment Benham and Reeves for the amount of material and intel that you put out about the London property market. We did our roundtable webinar in June, and I will put the link to it below this video for those that missed it. But thank you, Marc, for joining us and sharing with us all your thoughts from right there at the coalface in London. It's so interesting to hear, and we'll catch up with you again soon.
Thank you.